Good morning, 5i research community. My name is Chris White. I'm the head of research at 5i. Today is Friday, February 14th, and this is the TSX weekly wrap. So first thing that we're going to be looking at is kind of the price action for this week. This is looking at the S&P 500 for this week. And so one thing that's really interesting that we saw happen this week is we saw, the classic saying that markets bottom on bad news and they top on good news sort of expression. And so we had a string of bad economic data and other sort of geopolitical kind of events happening over the past few weeks. And so the market was heading lower or just seeing a lot of pressure from those sorts of negative headlines. But what we saw this week was appearing to be some sort of sea change or some sort of shift here. And so on Wednesday, we saw U.S. inflation came in really hot. And so the S&P 500 gapped down on that day, and we can see the gap down there. But throughout the day, it rose and it ended much higher than where it started. And then similarly on Thursday, we actually had the US PPI come in, which is another economic data point for inflation. And that came in really hot as well. The market opened up kind of in line with where it ended the previous day, a little bit higher. But it also rose throughout the day, ending much higher. And also we had some sort of a news press release on tariffs from the US midday Thursday, and still the market ended higher. So this is a really good case of markets bottom on bad news. And so essentially when we see a string of bad economic data or news come in, the market heads lower. Eventually, when we see bad news come in and then the market goes higher, that usually means that a lot of bad news has already been priced in. And so the market kind of starts to reflect that everything's been priced in, and maybe there's good news on the horizon that needs to be priced in now as well. So that's one interesting thing that's happened this week. Next, for those that don't know, we put out a series of tweets every day looking at, how much the TSX rose in the previous day, which stocks were the major gainers and losers, and which Canadian stocks are hitting new 52-week highs. So I've outlined just 4 stocks that I've hand selected here that are hitting new 52-week highs this week. So first we have BlackBerry, ticker is BB, then Telesat, TSAT, Solaris, SLS is the ticker, and then K92 Mining, that's KNT. So 2 of these are tech or communication names, and then the other 2 are miners. And we can see their price performances over the past month. So we can see BlackBerry's up 42%, Telesat's up 35%, Solaris about 25%, and then K92 about 6%. So pretty interesting developments there. So next we're looking at a Canadian stock that's recently caught my eye. It's Coveo Solutions, CVO. So this has hit a new high relative to the TSX. And so that's always interesting to me, is when, a stock is not only making new highs on any sort of time frame, but also relative to the TSX. So it's showing relative strength. So it has a market cap just under 1 billion. Sales growth is estimated to be 10+% over the next few years. It operates in the AI segment, so pretty topical. It's a leading provider of AI-powered platforms for enhancing and delivering digital experiences. And it recently popped on its recent quarterly earnings. So it had SaaS subscription revenue of about 32 million, which was at the top end of their previous guidance, a 36% growth rate in customers since September 30th, 2024. So not too long ago. They flipped positive on net income, and they're anticipating continued momentum and new bookings for Q4 2025. Then just looking at some of their fundamentals here, we see in the top panel, that's their price. We can see that it's pretty jumpy, and it's kind of been sideways for a couple of years, but it has shown recent strength in its momentum, as well as that kind of earnings release really did bring it up above its price from late 2024. So to me, that's showing positive momentum. It kind of made a higher low and potentially a higher high. So that's always a good trend. Then we're showing, revenue growth is accelerating, free cash flow is positive. It has a strong gross profit margin, something like what you'd see with a SaaS business. And then EBIT margin, it's negative, but it's shrinking. And so that means it could eventually flip positive. And we have seen a bunch of its profit metrics kind of flip positive recently. So that's one I think is interesting and one that we might keep our eye on here. Okay, and then lastly, what I'm looking for next week, next week on the economic calendar for Canada, we have the inflation rate data coming in on Tuesday morning. So previously we had a 1.8% inflation rate headline, and so we'll kind of see what kind of developments happen there. But essentially, if we continue to see softening inflation in Canada, it makes a lot of sense that bond yields would come down. That puts downward pressure on financing, and then the Bank of Canada is likely to continue their rate cutting cycle. And with GDP growth kind of remaining subdued and inflation also below 2%, I think that that makes sense, a lot of sense for a continued case in cutting rates here. And then we can potentially see some sort of economic growth as a result of that stimulus. So that's all that I have for this week's TSX Weekly Wrap. Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend.